Hello and welcome to the second part of this tutorial of free bones inside of Cartoon Animator 5. Now previously what we'd done is, as you can see on the screen, we'd taken a PNG and we'd then added bones to that PNG. We'd created a rig prop from it and we'd added the bones, and then we'd masked out layers by duplicating the image onto the bone and just selecting the bit that we want, masking out the rest, so that we could then build up a system that allows us to animate a still image, well, in this particular case, sort of more mechanical way. If you wanted the rubber band way of doing it, then you could have got away with just being as is, but we wanted a mechanical arm, and that requires us to separate out the layers. There's another way of doing the same thing, but it's organizing it all inside of your vector editor. Okay, so I'm going to unpreview this, and I'm going to take this image, and I'm going to go out of composer mode. And I'm going to take that image and I'm just going to shift it to one side like that. And I'm now going to go over to, well, I've got Illustrator and I've got Affinity Designer. This is actually the older Affinity Designer. So I'm going to use an older version of Affinity Designer. I've got certain things open and shut, but you can open and close panels however you like. But basically the workflow inside of Illustrator would be exactly the same. So I've basically got one layer with a bunch of groups, which are the individual arms are pretty much grouped. Well, that's an individual joint, but we've got arms, and I've just grouped them all together. I've got the two claws as separate items, and I've got the wall mount as a separate item as well. Okay, but I'm not actually going to use Illustrator. I'm going to do it in Affinity Designer because I'm more used to Affinity Designer. So here's Affinity Designer. Again, the same thing. We've got everything in groups, and it's exactly the same item inside both. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to animate it to the same point that we did the last one. So what I would probably do at this stage is I would take these two curves, which are the two claws, and I would put them inside of this group at the top, which is the final group for the claws. So I'm just going to take both of those and I'm going to stick them up in this group at the top like that. So if I turn it off, the whole claw goes off. Now you can see that the layer order is wrong. So I just need to make sure that these two ellipses are above the curves. And now you can see that the layer order is correct. And you can see that, oops, I turned those off by accident. You can see that that now works as it should do. So that's a group for the claw. And then there's a group for the arm 3, arm 2, arm 1, wall mount. Okay, and they're all on a layer. Now, the idea behind what we're going to do is we're going to take the image, and we've already grouped them. Could have been a whole lot of things, so you do need to group them into the appropriate places. Then we're going to give each group a specific name. Now, the name doesn't matter, but what you put after the name does. And that's going to be a colon, which is one dot on top of the other. I will show you in detail, so don't worry. But the naming convention matters because you're going to also create a bone layer. So the bone layer is going to be a completely separate layer to the image layer. And you're going to put dots on or whatever you want, which are going to represent the bones. So we'll have a root, say down here, say, probably have a pivot over here, and then we'll have bones, bone, bone, bone. I'll only do those. I would do more for these claws if I wanted to, but I'm not going to go too much. Don't want to take too much of your time. So the first thing is I need to have two layers, and they also need to have very specific names. These names do matter. What we call these groups don't matter as long as we use the same name for the bones. So I'm going to rename this layer, and I'm going to name it RL, Real Illusion, Image, because this is, oh, I'm not going to turn off me cap locks, Image. And then I'm going to put a colon. That's the important thing. You want this double dots, this colon at the end of it, because that's now said it's a particular layer that we know Cartoon Animator will look for when it actually starts to use this layer. Now, it also needs another layer, which I'm going to create here, which is going to also have a specific name that you can't change, RL Bone. Okay, colon. Again, you do need that colon. So this is where we're going to create the corresponding bones to whatever we call these. And you could call them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever. Or you could call them, we'll give them specific names. But I just want to say it doesn't matter as long as the same name is used for the bones as used for the groups. So if I go for the top group there in my list, that's the claw. So I'm simply going to rename that as claw. C-L-A-W colon. Again, colon is really important. The one underneath it is ARM3. So ARM3. And I'm giving the first letter a capital. It really doesn't matter, but you know, that's just what I've called it at the moment. I call it ARM2 colon, and that therefore should be ARM1, as you can see it is. So we'll call that ARM1, ARM1 colon, and the last one is going to be the wall mount. So I'll just call it mount. Okay, so they've all got names and they're all inside the image layer called image. Okay, oh, that didn't catch. Let's try that again. Mount colon enter. There we go. So that's all inside the RL image. Now these are important. These names are important because we're going to create bones. Now bones can be created, and make sure you've got the layer selected to when you're creating your bones. They can be created with any sort of shape. So you could use an ellipse, or you could use a square or a line or whatever. It just happens that inside of Affinity Designer I've got this little plus, which I quite like. So I'm going to take the plus over here, and that's going to be my root. It's really small, so I'm just going to grab it and hold the shift key to make it the correct size. And then I'm just going to move it down here. That's going to be my root. Okay. And I'm going to change its color because I'm not particularly happy with that color. And I'll make that root red. Okay, now this item needs to be called root. R-O-O-T colon. So that's something that Cartoon Animator is going to be looking for. Now I also need a pivot. So I'm going to copy this. And the way you copy it, if you've got the selection tool selected, and this works also in Illustrator, if you hold the Alt key and drag, you will create a copy. So Alt drag, and I'll make that a different color. So let's take that around to the blue. And that is going to be the object pivot. So notice it's duplicated the name, but we're going to call it object pivot. I am dyslexic, so I always spell out pivot because it gets it spelled correctly. Object pivot. Now I can create my bones. Okay, now I am going to create a bone for the for the mount. So I'm going to take the Alt key. I'm going to drag this up just onto the mount. I'm going to change its color to green. Okay, and I'm going to call that whatever this is called. So it's called mount colon. M-O-U-T colon. Now that has now linked the mount to this bone. So those are linked together, but they're not joined to anything. In fact, I don't want the mount to be joined to anything. I just want a bone specifying the mount as a separate item that needs to be specified. These inside of Cartoon Animator, each of these items will be known as a sprite. And each sprite should have a bone of some sort. So each one of these will be a sprite, each one of these groups. So I've got a sprite for mount, and I've got a bone for that sprite. Now I can create the bones from the arms. And I only do these three. I won't do the rest down here just to show you. So again, Alt, drag, put that in the middle. And that is corresponding to ARM1. So click in there, call it ARM1. And then I'm just going to hit enter. Now ARM1 at the moment is not connected to anything. It is just ARM1. That's the first bone of my chain. It's not connected to the mounts. They're not supposed to be connected. So it's just a bone. So now I'm going to Alt drag and I'm going to take that to here. And you'll notice it says ARM1, but this time I'm going to click at the end because it is ARM1 connected to this second bone, which is going to be called ARM2. And the way that we do connected to is a double colon. So I've got a single colon. If I do a double colon, I've now said ARM1 is connected to, and then the name that I give it, which is ARM2, single colon, is now the name of this sprite down here, ARM2. Okay, so it knows that ARM2, this particular one here, ARM1 is its parent, ARM2 is the actual sprite. So this bone is related to this sprite, but ARM1 is the parent. So if I now drag this, holding the Alt key again and drag it down to here, it basically types it pretty much in for me. I just need to change the actual numbers in this case. So ARM2 will now be the parent, and the sprite after the colon will be ARM3. So I'm now saying arm2 is the parent of arm3. Arm3 at the end is the name. The double colon is the connection. Okay, so those are now connected. And let's do the last one. Just put it in there just so you can see. I'll drag that down to there. You can scale it. Doesn't matter what you do with these. If you want to make it smaller, you can make it smaller. Move it around wherever you want. That doesn't matter, but the names do. So this particular one is going to be arm3 to, not arm3, obviously. Instead, it's going to be to claw. C-L-A-W. So the parent is arm3, the child is claw. Enter. And that's it. I've got the layer, RL bone, which is get all the bones, all the connections that are made. And then I've got the sprite layer, or the image layer, RL image, real illusion image, which is the sprites. And they've got the same names. The only ones I've added in, I've got a root, I've got an object pivot, which is this point here, which is where it will come in. You could put the pivot over here. You can move the pivot wherever you like. Okay, it's just where the pivot point will come in. And I just think the object pivoting there is fine, but it really doesn't matter. And then I've connected it. So the mount is a bone standing on its own. Arm 1 is a bone on its own, not connected to anything. However, arm 1 is the parent. So I've got my double colon, arm 2. Arm 2 is the parent, double colon, of arm 3. Arm 3 is the parent, double colon, of claw. Okay, now you can save that. So if I do file, and I'll do save as, I'll stick it on the desktop just to show you. And I'll call it, so rather than articulated arm start, I'll call it final. Okay, so this is an Affinity Designer template. Okay, so Affinity Designer file. That's not what you can use inside of Cartoon Animator. You need to have an SVG file. So you need to export, and you need to do this with Illustrator as well, really. So if I come here and I go down to export, make sure you select SVG. So I've chose SVG digital small size, raster 72, not that anything will be rasterized, and everything else is just export. And I'll put that also on the desktop. I'll call it also articulated arm final, instead of been working with other things in the past. Okay, so that is the arm done. Now, all you need to do is go to Cartoon Animator, find that file. There it is, final, drag it in. Boom. There it is, all working, wired up, ready to go. And if I was to preview this and choose any bone, you'll see that it's completely set by the points that I chose. And if you get the points wrong, you can go back and redo them in your editor. I should even be able to move this one, I think. There you go. Yeah, so you can see my point isn't exactly in the center there. So if I'm unhappy with it, I can go back and realign that and then just export it again. Okay, so that's how you can do it inside of a vector editor and produce something, I think, relatively quickly once you get used to it. Now, the key to this actually is to practice. So take a file such as this and to start to group it up, and then to start to create the bones. Make sure you get the correct layer names, the correct group names that correspond, and start building things up and practice doing it. The more you practice doing this, the more natural it becomes, and the quicker you'll be able to actually go ahead and start to use this on a regular basis. For me, looking at the two options, obviously we've got the, let me come out of preview and come back to stage mode. I've got the PNG version here, and I've got the final version. They're slightly different zoom magnifications, but for me this one is much easier because I've got a vector image. I just need to make sure things are grouped. It might take a little bit longer to organize. It might be a bit quicker to go straight with the PNG, but it's not necessarily as accurate unless you're going to spend an awful lot of time going in there and painting all the appropriate things out. So that's Freebone inside of Cartoon Animator, and also creating something inside of a vector editor that's going to be recognized and easy to operate inside of Cartoon Animator. And then if you want to actually animate the item, select it. K will get you the bone editor, and then you've got hierarchy view, you've got image view. Oh, but there isn't an image. So the final thing to show you is if you go back and you go K, or you can actually hit it here if you want to go to the bone, you can actually capture an image. Okay, so that's captured an image of whatever it is you've created with all the bones inside of there. Great, so what I can do now is go back to stage mode, select the item, K, or hit the bones, and there you go. You actually can select bones up here as well if you want to be able to do your editing. So it's a great product, works really well. I hope you found these tutorials useful and that you can have a lot of fun rigging up and playing with things inside of Cartoon Animator 5. My name's Andrew Devis. Thank you very much for watching.